Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. It means the world. Today we're taking a look at a knife from Ruike. That is my understanding on how you pronounce this. And if you're not familiar with Ruike knives, it's made by the same company who makes Phoenix flashlights. And you can see Phoenix light on the little sleeve here. So it comes in a cardboard sleeve. And I wanted to show the packaging with this one in particular. It's a very budget-friendly knife, but packaging is decent for a $30 knife. So kind of a nice little presentation there. So just wanted to show that real quick. So let's get the packaging out of the way and talk about this knife. So this is the Ruike model P121. And this one in particular is the P121-G, G standing for green. And it's also called the Hussar or Hussar, Hussar. So it doesn't have an actual name. Most of the Ruike knives that I've seen are just numbers, but this one does have a name. It's the Hussar, which is the model P121. So real quick down and dirty, what are we looking at? We're looking at G10 handle scales, a Sandvik 14C28N blade steel. It is a flipper design and it costs $30. So that's your short and sweet. The overall length on this guy is 8.5 inches and it comes in at 4.5 ounces. So a pretty beefy guy. Let's do a few size comparisons. We've got our Ontario Wrap Model 1 and our Ontario Wrap Model 2 with the pivots lined up. So just a hair smaller than the Wrap 1. So it's definitely a full-size knife. Let's bring in the Spyderco PM2 and the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. Overall length is almost identical to the PM2. So if you've got one of those, it's basically the same overall length there. Obviously quite a bit larger than the Mini Griptilian. So there's a few size comparisons for you. The blade on this guy is 3.75 inches in length. It is a satin finish and a really nice one at that. It's kind of got this upswept blade shape, which is definitely attractive to look at, I must say. It has a flat grind and it does have a swedge that runs the entire length of the blade up top, as you can see there. So the blade stock looks a little thinner than it really is because you've got that swedge. So that's what we're looking at as far as the blade. And I do like Sandvik steels quite a lot, actually. Most, I should say a lot of Chinese manufactured knives these days are coming in with D2 steel. I don't have any problems with D2. I've had some really excellent D2 and I've had some pretty poor D2 steel. It's a generic steel. D2 can be made by anybody. It's not one particular manufacturer who provides D2. This, you have companies like Carpenter and Bowler and Crucible and Sandvik who actually, it's a brand name, right? D2 is a generic steel, whereas Sandvik is a brand name steel, and I actually prefer it to D2. So just for what it's worth, this is from Sandvik 14C28N steel. The handle on this guy is going to be 4.75 inches in length, made from G10, and it comes in two colors, black and green. The G10 is moderately grippy. It's I wouldn't call it smooth, but it's definitely not as aggressive as something like a Spyderco Paramilitary 2, for example, that has that kind of really aggressive, very heavily textured G10, which I actually really like. But it's definitely not like that. It's moderately textured, and for EDC, it's perfectly fine. So no problems with the texture. It's got some contouring to it, as you can see. It's kind of chamfered and kind of beveled on the ends, which is nice, and that's going to be the same on both sides. So that's what we're looking at as far as the handle is concerned. The liners within the knife are stainless steel. They are not nested in that they're not sitting inside the G10. They're just kind of one on top of the other. And I'll compare that really quickly to another knife I have nearby that I just got done reviewing from Kubi, just to kind of show you the difference. So this has full steel liners, but you can't see them looking at it from this angle. You have to kind of tilt it to see those steel liners that are inside, nested into the G10, whereas these are non-nested, and you can clearly see the steel liners. So not nested, although they are skeletonized. So if I get just the right angle, you'll see those milling holes there where they drilled out some steel to reduce some weight. And as I mentioned, this guy comes in at 4.5 ounces. The action on this thing is quite good. It's a flipper, as I mentioned, and it's running on stainless steel captured ball bearing washers. And so the action is crazy, crazy smooth. Opening and closing, it's just a pleasure to flip this knife and to close this knife. It's kind of got that drop shut action to it where you can just kind of wiggle it and let the weight drop shut. The detent is a little weak for my preference. I'd put it at about a 6 out of 10. I would like a bit stronger of a detent. I did have a couple misfires where it didn't flip all the way, but again, for EDC, for most people, it's going to be a non-issue. That is my preference. I wish this had a slightly stronger detent. But generally speaking, the action is crazy smooth, flips out nice. Closing it actually is very enjoyable. I found myself just opening and closing this thing a lot during the time that I've had it on loan. So that's what we're looking at as far as the action. Definitely dig in the ball bearing washers. As far as lockup and centering is concerned, this is a liner lock, as you can see there. And the lockup's at about 50%, which I'd prefer it to lock up quite a bit earlier than that personally. I prefer about 25%, but that is what it is. The lockup is very strong. There's no up and down play. There is a tiny bit of side to side, but not enough to cause any concern whatsoever. And the centering on this guy is as perfect as it could possibly be. Just right down the center, straight as an arrow. So excellent centering on the P121. So now we'll move into kind of texturing, jimping, backspacers, that kind of fun stuff. So the only texture on this knife, other than the texture on the handle itself, is the texturing that they put on the liner lock here, kind of that scallop texturing, which is functional for sure to get in and disengage that lock, which again just makes it a pleasure to kind of fidget with, which I found myself doing quite a bit. Otherwise, there's really no texturing to speak of. There's no jimping anywhere. There's none on the spine of the blade. There is none on the flipper tab. It's completely smooth and well kind of rounded. There is no backspacer, so it's a complete flow-through design, which I like. So yeah, not a very textured knife. For EDC, and I say this a lot in my videos, for everyday carry, for your basic EDC tasks that we use our knives for 99% of the time, I don't know that this needs any texturing. I do like jimping. I have nothing against it, but I don't get too hung up when there is none. This is perfectly functional just the way it is. Some might prefer there be jimping, others like less texture. It's all preference, so I don't particularly care one way or another on this knife, but it just happens to be a pretty smooth knife overall as far as texture is concerned. The pocket clip is pretty good. So it's nested in that it sits down kind of below the surface of the G10, and it has 2 screws, so it's very secure. It's not going anywhere. The hardware is not recessed, but I didn't find that to be a problem. Coming in and out of khaki cargo shorts, jeans, it was a non-issue as far as carryability. So a decent clip. It's a loop over design, not fully deep carry, but just a bit sticking out, maybe 3/8, half of an inch, something like that. So no issue with the carryability of the pocket clip. It is for tip up right hand only, so you only have one position on this pocket clip. So for you lefties, you're just gonna have to carry it that way, and when you retrieve the knife, kind of adjust your grip to flip it open and then close it as such. So one position is what it is, can't change it. So that's the pocket clip. As far as ergonomics are concerned, it's very comfortable. There's no kind of dynamic curves. It's a pretty straightforward kind of straight lines on this guy. So, it's not going to be one of those like just melt in your hand, everything contours perfectly to every individual finger. It's pretty plain Jane, and I have no problem with that. It's very comfortable. It's going to fit in most hands, I think, pretty nicely. But you're not going to grab this and say, this thing just melts into my hand, because there's really not much to do any melting, right? It's just kind of straight lines. And that's okay, again, for EDC, for what most of us use our knives for 99% of the time, it's a complete non-issue. I don't need any crazy finger grooves to make this thing, you know, stick to my hand like glue, because I'm opening packages, letters, cutting strings, things like that. So no issues with the ergos. The one, I guess, downside for me in using this and carrying it and testing it is the pocket clip does create a moderate hot spot when I am in a kind of hammer grip. So I always like to qualify kind of two different grips. One is I'm going to open this real quickly to open a box, cut up an apple, or, you know, cut my steak, whatever, and put it away. It's a light to moderate grip. I'm not doing anything crazy. I don't need a ton of, I don't need to squeeze down on it. That's what I'm going to do 95% of the time. If I do need a really, really strong purchase on this thing, for me personally, like to, as I always say, to break down a bunch of cardboard, or if you're doing some sort of, bushcrafty, camp tasks or something like that, if you put it in a hammer grip and really bear down, I get a moderate hot spot from the pocket clip. It's not near as bad as the one that I got on the Kubi knife that I reviewed. I think it was the Kubi KU, what the heck was it called? I think it was the KU 074, I want to say. It was also on loan from JD. That one gave me a crazy hot spot. This is just kind of a moderate hot spot. I broke down a bunch of cardboard with it, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't feel great, but not bad enough to complain about, really. So that's my only kind of major complaint with this knife, is that I wish the ergos were just a little better, kind of in that stronger hammer grip. But there's only so much you can do, right? If you're going to have a pocket clip on a knife, it's got to go somewhere. It's got to have a shape to it. So if you really bear down on most knives, you're going to get some sort of a hot spot somewhere. So again, something to take note of, but not something that I think would dissuade me from purchasing the knife. Personally, for me, it's a little on the large side in terms of its length. It's a little on the heavy side. So probably not something that I would personally buy or EDC, but at $30 to get a good name brand steel, in my opinion, probably the best truly budget steel, 14C28N, with nice G10 and good action, I think $30 is more than fair for this knife from Ruike, which again is the model P121G, on loan from my man JD. So thank you so much again for letting me take a look at it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.